Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast, Friday Injury Edition. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, joining me, as always, in this lovely Friday afternoon. PFF analyst Nic Bodiford. Nic, what's going on, man?
Hey, Ian, good to see you. How you doing?
Doing good, man. It's good to be back. I selfishly, I'm not gonna take the fault. My friend selfishly had a fall Saturday wedding. I tried to get this in last week. I failed, so I apologize to all of you about that. Hoping that will be the one and only miss for this entire season. So let's focus on the present and focus on a Week 8 injury report that is awfully long once again. Plenty of trades are in the air. Plenty of guys getting added late week. Plenty to talk about after we get through each and every fantasy relevant injury. Nic and I will also be going through some prop bets and favorite DFS plays of the week. So appreciate you guys that have reached out, talked about wanting to get more of a DFS presence in here. I love it. It's how, I really came up in this industry from the start being DFS focused. So really do like that final edition we now have going. So with all that said, everyone, going to start off with the quarterback position. Nothing to really overly worry about except for in Tennessee. Ryan Tannehill is questionable with an ankle injury. He didn't practice to start the week. He got back on the field on Thursday and then didn't practice on Friday. So look, Nic, we're not excited about starting Tannehill regardless. I do have him in like a super flex league or two, so I know sometimes you got to do what you got to do, but he's certainly not someone just in this run first offense that many people are excited about. But if he gets ruled out, all of a sudden Malik Willis enters the picture. How excited do you think we should be about potentially playing Malik Willis, who, no, we're not expecting him to be the most polished passer to start, but we have seen many a rookie quarterback be perfectly fine in fantasy because of that sweet, sweet rushing upside, even if them being great real-life assets still might be a ways away.
Yeah, I'd be excited about him, and I'd start him in a desperation situation. Rankings-wise, I'd put him in at, I think, QB 13.
That's actually right on, man. I was looking at that Trevor Lawrence, that Justin Fields spot. I have them QB 13, QB 14 right now. I think that's right where he fits in. I would start Malik Willis ahead of guys like Russell Wilson. How far we freaking come. Marcus Mariota, Matthew Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, Jimmy Garoppolo, and the rest of the guys. So truly, just based on him coming out, I mean, some of the conversations, if you guys have been listening to this podcast throughout the offseason when we've had on, more dynasty, more draft experts, and again, common just idea with him was that the second he steps into a starting role, he's going to be arguably the second most lethal rushing quarterback behind only Lamar Jackson. So we can talk about, Fields and obviously, Trey Lance before he got injured. There were other contenders, just realized he's firmly in that conversation. And again, has that skill set to be far better in fantasy than real life. Also have 5 other quarterbacks where the situations are already decided. Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers, good to go. He keeps getting the Wednesday off with the right thumb. And we saw him like holding it last week. Like, this is clearly a problem for him. They didn't throw a Hail Mary at the end of the game, and this is Mr. Hail Mary right here. I was getting psyched up for it, and they had to do the lateral play. Low key, amazing throw by Rodgers at the end that went right through the O lineman's legs. Just a pretty hilarious moment for everyone that wasn't a Green Bay fan right there. But yeah, not the spot you want to be starting him this week against that juggernaut Bills defense on Sunday night. Again, Malik Willis, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Geno Smith, Daniel Jones, all guys I would be willing to start ahead of Rodgers this week. Also have Let's Ride Broncos quarterback Russell Wilson back in the lineup with that hamstring injury. London game, everybody. Jaguars, Broncos, 9:30 Eastern AM on Sunday. If you're like me and you like to sleep in, we got to either get that shit done on Saturday night or set those alarm early on Sunday. So I don't think there's actually on either of these teams anyone we need to overly worry about, which is the good news. So fingers crossed that we don't get a surprise inactive or anything, but I think all these guys in Broncos and Jaguars are good to go for Sunday. So at least we have that going for us. Colts quarterback Matt Ryan, not benched because of the shoulder, Nic, but he's ruled out because of the shoulder anyway. Like, how'd that conversation go? Matt's just sitting there, training room, just really in pain. And Frank Reich pats him on the back. And it's like, by the way, man, get better, but you are also benched. So yeah, don't worry about that. Sam Ehlinger, I'm sure we'll be talking about him a little bit later in our DFS section. And finally, Raiders quarterback Derek Carr. He got banged up really early in the game last week and was limited to start the week with a back injury. He is not listed. Good to go as a top 10 option at the position against his banged up Saints secondary. Moving on again to running back, we got Raheem Mostert with a knee injury. I was nervous, Nic. He popped up on Thursday as limited after being in full. He was limited again on Friday, but he is not listed and fully expected to see his usual 15-plus touches and 60% snap rate. This is a matchup here where we're all expecting Tua and company to go bonkers against the Lions. But, Nic, I feel like Mostert really warrants strong RB2 consideration, should be in a lot of lineups, and is a decent enough DFS. I don't want to say full contrarian play. I know he's already got a decent amount of roster monstership going. But I do think Mostert's breakout potential is being overlooked a little bit this week because of all the Tony Pollard noise.
Yep, that's all fair. I did the FF Hustle with Brian Drake earlier this week. He talked about Mostert as a rest of season candidate based on his kind of post week 11 bye rushing schedule. For the knee reason, like to add, I would be suggesting people add Chase Edmonds.
Good call, my friend. Lions running back DeAndre Swift, not listed. He's back, baby. Practicing full all week. Ankle, shoulder, not a problem. Get him in those lineups. Going into this week, just ranking at the beginning of the week, I thought he might be back. And because of that, I had him more as a low-end RB2. Just a little bit worried because in week 2, we did see them have him active, but not actually be willing to fully feature him, but not even having a designation. I think DeAndre Swift is right back in that top 12 running back conversation. Like full PPR, Nick, DeAndre Swift versus Dameon Pierce. I think I'm taking Swift. Am I crazy?
No, you're not. Yeah,
Thank you.
This game is going to pop off.
There's a pretty, it's the way these running back rotations are breaking. We're starting to get just a lot of fantasy friendly guys. Walker, Pierce, ETN, Stevenson, they're all in that zone. And guess what? All these guys should be started. If you have any sort of start sit question with DeAndre Swift, you better have a damn blessed lineup to be offering anything about that. In Arizona, running back James Conner thought he was going to be able to get back out there this week, but it was a DNP on Friday, and he has already been ruled out with that rib injury. So, hey, 2 claps for Cliff Kingsbury, actually not giving us the usual game time decision bullshit, especially always makes it harder with the Cardinals playing at 4. So, Darrell Williams also questionable with the knee injury. So, Benjamin's going to see 15-plus touches out here and around 70% of the snaps. So, I'm going to be moving obviously up a little bit, man. Definitely a top 20 running back. How would you feel about Eno versus like Darrell Henderson, Nick? I almost lean Eno.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I definitely lean Eno. Yes.
So truly, Benjamin, someone that went out there last week, he is getting the pretty much true 3-down role. We'll see a little bit of Keontae Ingram, but both Connor and Williams being banged up, can't say enough good things for in an offense that does seem to be finally ascending with the return of DeAndre Hopkins. Raiders running back Josh Jacobs was on the injury report with a foot injury, limited throughout the week, but he's not listed. Good to go. Expect that usual workhorse role. Don't need more than one hand to count the number of running backs to start ahead of Josh Jacobs this week. Tony Pollard, truthers, embrace, rejoice, whatever you want to do. Ezekiel Elliott is doubtful with that knee injury. So Mike McCarthy, man, if there is ever going to be a guy play through a doubtful designation, it seems like Zeke could maybe have a chance to do so, just the way he and McCarthy have talked. But it's like well over 90% of doubtful players never end up playing. So it's a 1:00 game. I really can't imagine a scenario where Zeke is going to be out there playing. So in that case, yeah, it's Tony Pollard. He's going to be a top 5 running back. The amount of just extra people we've had like trying to tell us, we know, okay, fantasy football doesn't have to be the hardest. Tony Pollard is really good. And when Zeke's out, he gets a workhorse role. There we go, everyone. Get him in those lineups. A more tricky situation to go through is in Carolina with Chuba Hubbard missing this one with an ankle injury. So, Nick, I do think Deontay Foreman will see most of the backfield work, but it could be 60-40 or something with Raheem Blackshear. Do you have any sort of lean on what this post-CMC, post-Chuba Panthers backfield could look like?
I think that Blackshear is worth a speculative add. I would have a really hard time adding him or starting him. Like I liked Blackshear in the preseason. Foreman, he lived on big plays last week. He was terribly inefficient outside of a couple of long gains, though. So maybe Blackshear and GPP, like the deepest of tournaments, but yeah.
I don't want Blackshear. I am just wondering if he could limit Foreman. Hey, we don't want to take away the guy's big plays, but it's not even more so about that. It's like, do we expect this offense to keep producing big plays and touchdown opportunities and targets to Deontay Foreman? All those questions I just asked, I would probably say no to. So Deontay Foreman, someone that as I'm looking at the ranks right now, I had Chuba RB27 before this even happened. So even if it's a little bit of a bump, maybe RB, he's a borderline RB2 if you want to be nice. If I get any start sit questions involving Deontay Foreman with a reasonable RB2, I am picking the other guy every single time. Also, Rams running back Darrell Henderson had an illness, but he's not listed. Cam Akers is out once again due to personal Williams. personal reasons. We don't have Kyron Williams back just yet. He's still on IR with the foot injury. Malcolm Brown will still be a little bit involved, but hey, Darrell Henderson, 2 weeks ago before the bye, 70% plus snaps and was their featured running back. So still have some questions about the Rams offense, especially against Nick Bosa and company. At least for this week, though, it does seem like Henderson should be that guy. Nick, I get this. I think it was Evan Silva that actually tweeted it, though. I have this feeling that the Rams aren't done adding to this position. I don't know if they're comfortable enough trusting Kyron Williams to merely come back and provide a spark. They've never seen this guy be healthy and play an actual professional snap yet. As Evan Silva noted, the Rams apparently were in the running for Christian McCaffrey. So I don't have a source beyond that, but do we just gut feeling, Nick? Do we really think Darrell Henderson is going to be the Rams' featured running back the rest of the season? I don't really think so.
No, probably not. If it isn't like Kareem Hunt, then it probably will just be Kyron Williams, or he'll be the lead back by like a 51% margin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even be shocked if Malcolm Brown eats into this a little bit more. Nobody loves Malcolm Brown more than Sean McVay, after all. And appreciate our YouTube chat, our guy Victor saying that they are indeed interested in Kareem Hunt. Yeah, hey, I do these shows with a Bleacher Report every week. It's a good time. But if we look at think logically about the main guys we have on the trade block right now. Kareem Hunt is one of them, and I know Kareem Hunt's roster, but what's going to be the first move that happens as soon as Kareem Hunt is, or if he's traded somewhere? D'Ernest Johnson becomes the key waiver wire pickup. So if you guys have a deep bench right now, you just have someone out there that you're just leaving on the bench, for locker room purposes or whatever, don't be afraid to cut them in favor of D'Ernest Johnson, who, without Kareem Hunt in the picture, all of a sudden, no, we're not feeling good about starting D'Ernest Johnson in the flex, but he becomes one of the most valuable handcuffs in fantasy. We saw that 3 times last year where both Chubb and Hunt were out of the picture, and we got returned with legit top 10 fantasy production each and every time. So D'Ernest Johnson, I think, makes a lot of sense with Kareem Hunt. Mike Gesicki, if he happens to be available, he's already starting to get a little bit more involved in Miami. God forbid he becomes the Packers' lone one good free agent, not free agent, but the one time they try to, really juice up this offense. We've heard some rumors about that. So I like D'Ernest, Mike Gesicki, KJ Hamler. If the Jerry Jeudy stuff ends up being real, all of a sudden he's in 2 wide receiver sets. And the final note was Nico Collins. He's already banged up right now, so I think there's a better chance he's out there. It doesn't seem like it's a super long thing. If Brandon Cooks does end up actually getting shipped out, though, all of a sudden it's Nico Collins, Texans wide receiver 1 season. Over at wide receiver now, we got Raiders wide receiver Devontae Adams, questionable with apparently a pretty severe illness, but we're expecting him to go ahead, give it his best Michael Jordan flu game effort. Also have Mac Hollins, questionable with a heel. He's been playing through this, and Hunter Renfrow with the hip injury isn't listed. Unfortunately, Mac Hollins is the one really playing the full-time role, so can't quite get behind Renfrow. Go ahead. If Adams is healthy and he's active, we need to fire him up, especially. Just always. I shouldn't even say especially, but the matchup, the upside for Adams is the roof, and with Marshawn Lattimore out for the Saints, might as well be on the moon. Dolphins wide receiver Jalen Waddle, not listed with a shoulder injury. Always continue to fire him up in lineups of all shapes and sizes. And the terrible news, Nick. Well, I guess we got a little bit better news just now on Jamar Chase. He's out with the hip injury. He's not an IR, though. I did see some people wondering if this could legit be season-ending variety. So I believe they said it was a small stress fracture in his hip. Do you get the exact reading on that, Nick?
It is a hairline fracture with a labral tear. And
okay.
Jeff Mueller, physical therapist on Twitter, his recommendation is to buy as soon as possible.
Great. Okay. I love Jeff's work. That's fantastic news then. Okay. The only reason I was laughing, people, was because it's like, oh, this injury isn't bad. And then Nick reads it out and it's like a torn labrum and a freaking fractured hip. So apparently it's not that bad. Get better, Jamar Chase. It does sound like, the original timeline, 4 to 6 weeks, mostly closer to 4. So great news there for Jamar. In the meantime, T. Higgins, upside wide receiver 1. Tyler Boyd, someone I have ranked inside my top 20 wide receivers. He's had 13 games without one of Higgins or Chase, and with Joe Burrow, 7 top 20 finishes in those, only 3 finishes outside the top 36. So really high combination of floor and ceiling for Boyd without Chase in there. And even Hayden Hurst, we do need to keep an eye on him. He was limited with this ankle and I believe the hip injury he's been dealing with. So not expecting that to necessarily keep him out. He has been playing throughout, but it is Monday night. So ideally, if there is a problem with that, you can just turn around and get Harrison Bryant. Just realize we're not quite in the clear with Hayden Hurst yet. We'll get those injury reports tomorrow in the middle of Saturday. By the way, just Mike Thomas, the other Mike Thomas, is expected to replace Chase in 3 wide receiver sets. Not really expecting Burrow to focus any targets on him. over in Detroit, Nick, I still can't wrap my simple mind around this one. But Amon-Ra St. Brown is questionable because he's in the concussion protocol, but he's not concussed. The Lions told us he's not concussed, but he's also questionable. He practiced in full on Friday. Remember, he's not concussed, but he is questionable because of the concussion protocol. Allegedly, I've been told in my comments, the new concussion protocol requires you to be in the concussion protocol for at least 6 days, even if you're not concussed. So is that basically what's going on here, Nick?
What happened is he started experiencing dizziness after the issue. I think it's probably vertigo, and that can happen with your balance center. The NFL protocol is if a player exhibits concussion symptoms, which dizziness is one, then he gets placed into the concussion protocol. So he just has to get through, I think it's a full participation today without any new symptoms, and he should be fine.
Jeez, man, this is I have a feeling this takes a turn like COVID did last year, where all of a sudden, the playoffs come and the NFL finds bigger things to worry about.
Yeah.
Certainly seems like the sun god is going to be out there. I would expect
Yeah.
sometimes we do, like Dan Campbell's been pretty forthright about this all week. So with that said, we are getting Amon-Ra back in lineups of all shapes and sizes. There seems to be, we keep going back to this, like, oh, can we really trust Amon-Ra St. Brown again? Yes, we saw the guy hurt his ankle and then get concussed. That's been what stopped Amon-Ra St. Brown, not a defense, them freaking hurting him accidentally. So it's one of those things where I have Amon-Ra in full PPR as my wide receiver 11 on the week. Again, should be in lineups of heavily most shapes and sizes. Also note Josh Reynolds continues to be good to go, playing through that knee injury. Hey, borderline wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 type with DJ Chark and Jameson Williams still out of the picture. All right, with the Seahawks, ever optimistic Pete Carroll got DK Metcalf listed as questionable despite not practicing all week with that knee injury. He's being called a game time decision, as is Tyler Lockett. Hamstring and ribs. That's the problem here, Nick. That ribs issue is somewhat new, so I'm not as optimistic with just saying Lockett will be fine. Penny Hart is doubtful with the hamstring injury, whatever. So with this in mind, man, this is going to be, I believe it's a 4:00 game, right? The Seahawks-Giants game?
I'll double check.
Seahawks and Giants. So there's two things going on here. Yeah, okay, it is a 4:30 game. So we really need to be sure of this. And they usually announce these actives and actives if we don't get tipped off on it before around 2:30 p.m. on Sunday afternoon. So that's the one problem there. The other problems is it's Seattle weather is not looking good at all. I always go to rotogrinders.com for my weather information because, I'm not a weatherman, but maybe in a different life. Anyway, let's see. Kevin Roth always does a great job. Assigns games, green, orange, or kind of red, I guess, weather worries. And the only one this week that there is a concern is going to be the Giants at Seattle. Kevin's notes, the weather you picture when you think about Seattle, this is it. It's chilly, it's wet, and it's breezy. Not one factor is all that impactful. The winds will top out between 10 to 15 miles per hour. The temperature is nearly irrelevant, and the rain should be a steady light rain as opposed to a true deluge. But all added up, it's pretty ugly stuff. The rain could lead to more of a reliance on the ground game than usual. So that'd be my only notes there. Because we don't have these guys, and we're not going to know if they're out there until 4:30. Just if it's a close start sit decision. If it's Tyler Lockett and Chris Olave, take Chris Olave. Don't even think twice about it. It's when we get to the Tyler Lockett versus Darius Slayton. There's not to just hate on Darius Slayton, but you want to be able to have a decent backup option. If you don't, go ahead and just take the guy is going to be out there. Rams wide receiver Van Jefferson back off the IR list, and Sean McVay says that he should have his usual role. Do you think this really could just drive the final stake in the Allen Robinson experience, Nick? Because one of the craziest things I've just found over the past 2 weeks looking at this room, Bennett Skrowanek has more freaking targets this year, one more than Allen Robinson. He's got more receptions, more receiving yards. They need this in this offense. What they need is someone that can kind of stretch the field. That's why they've been trying to make Tutu Atwell work in. Hey, A-Rob got that touchdown before the bye. Maybe I'm just overthinking it. It's just Cooper Kupp and Henderson, and that's freaking it in the offense. But any thoughts on Van Jefferson's return here?
It could go either way. He could take over as the number 2, but his I mean, he's not that fast, but he does the downfield thing. He could just add that element and open things up in the intermediate. Unlock it. I do think he'll play.
Okay.
Warren Sharp put together a highlight reel where he just dives when he catches the ball. Now he'll protect his ribs.
That was a pretty funny one. It was like Tyler Lockett's quest, not to get tackled even once in his yards after the catch situations. Good, man. What's the best ability, Nick? Availability. Tyler Lockett proving that. Seriously, guys, don't scoff at me about the Van Jefferson stuff. This guy had 800 yards and 6 touchdowns last year. Who'd Matthew Stafford throw his first bomb touchdown to? It was to Van Jefferson. So the one thing I'll say, I am not buying Tyler Higbee's start of the season continuing really into the second half. This has been so overwhelmingly volume based and an offense that has been terrible. We saw this happen in the end of, was it 2019? I believe maybe the end of 2020 really was not going well for the Rams at all. The two worst stretches of Sean McVay's tenure there have involved the quarterback force feeding Tyler Higbee the football. What happened the next season after that? They stopped force feeding Tyler Higbee the football because that's not how you want to go out there and win football games. So I get it. The tight end map, isn't all that great, but hey, it's okay. Nick, turn your mic up, bro. You're a little bit quiet. Appreciate you guys letting us know in the chat. There we go. Great day to be great. All right, Saints wide receivers. Evergreen statement here. Michael Thomas out with a foot injury. Jarvis Landry out with an ankle injury. Not great, guys. But you know who it is great for? Chris Olave, legit top 20 option at the position. And also a little more on this later. Guys, actually, I'll tell you right now, go bet. Keep listening, but go to DraftKings Sportsbook and bet over 4.5 receptions for Alvin Kamara. 4.5. When I was like getting ready to do this other show earlier, that prop wasn't out there. I just assumed it was going to be 5.5. No, 4.5 for Alvin Kamara. 3 straight games clearing that number with ease with Andy Dalton under center. Not expecting that to change again with Thomas and Landry ruled out. So Olave looking great. Should also see Marquez Callaway, Traquan Smith out there. Look, they are not great options by any stretch, but hey, we do have this potential shootout here with the Raiders, with the Saints. If you're in some of these 14-team league, 3 flex leagues like I have, you can do worse than having some of these guys out there on the bench. In San Francisco, yeah.
Quick thing on the Saints. Nick Underhill tweeted out a couple of injury updates. Jameis Winston ruptured a tendon in his ankle. That's why he's been out. He can play on it, but he will be prone to in-game setbacks. So Andy Dalton, I think his job is more secure than we might have thought it was. And Jarvis Landry suffered a setback at some point lately. So he might, have an even longer extended absence than we thought it was going to be.
I love after every single one of these pods we do, Nick, someone always has to comment that, oh, Ian didn't know when he got Andy Dalton to join the squad. So it's good to see your lookalike continuing to get the conversation going. The only celebrity lookalike I've ever been blessed with was Aaron Kraft, former Ohio State point guard. Yours is just a little bit more cool. Okay, with the 49ers, Deebo Samuel out with a hamstring injury. Juwan Jennings is questionable with the hamstring injury. So this is great news for Brandon Ayuk to lead the way. Again, this is a passing game that honestly Jimmy G's been playing good ball over the past 2 weeks. He hasn't been getting much help from the rest of the roster, which I know is a rarity, but it just kind of has been the case. So Brandon Ayuk will leap up several spots here. I would say, like Nick, Devontae Smith or Brandon Ayuk this week.
Ooh, that's tough. And I think that just kind of illustrates
that's right where he
legit. Is. Yeah. I put him ahead of Devontae. I get you can split hairs there.
I have Chris Olave, wide receiver 19, McLaurin right behind him, and Devontae right behind him. I'm going to, maybe crack open a beer, see how I'm feeling after that, and then we'll go ahead and make the final decision. But that low-end wide receiver 2 range with Brandon Ayuk right there. Okay, if both those guys are out, Deebo and Juwan Jennings, I would expect Ray McLeod and Danny Gray, their early round pick, to be out there. That said, it's Kittle, McCaffrey, and Ayuk. I doubt anyone else is going to have too much volume. In Houston, Nico Collins out with a groin injury, and Brandon Cooks is questionable with the wrist injury, even though he practiced in full on Friday. So Cooks wasn't listed on the injury report all week, and then he practices in full. Now he's questionable. I'm wondering what the hell is going on, Nick. And as much as I do wonder, hey, could we see a showcase? Who needs to see Brandon Cooks play another game and get force-fed 15 targets before being like, okay, fine, we'll trade for him? I think we kind of saw this last week with the Jaguars not playing James Robinson. Obviously, they committed to ETN, but they didn't feel the need to go run Robinson out there 25 times to show people how good he was. They basically put him in bubble wrap as other than 5 or 10 snaps throughout that game. So Brandon Cooks, it's a tough matchup. Christian Fulton with a K shut him down last year, 2 catches, 18 scoreless yards, and has been doing a good job in shadow covers this year. Cooks, maybe he gets force-fed the targets just by virtue of Collins being out, but Nick, man, we haven't seen it much from Cooks this year. This isn't the easiest matchup in the world. I think some of those fantasy points allowed stats is more so due to the Bills just going bonkers in week 2. I have Cooks more so in that, mid to low end, probably more mid-end wide receiver 3 range. I'm not loving going to the well here. Do you have any thoughts on the situation?
I think that you've summed this up pretty aptly. On the questionable tag aspect, 71.1% of players play when questionable, and from earlier with Zeke, 94.3% of players with the doubtful tag do not play.
Oh, that doubtful one's always wild. All right, Cowboys wide receiver Noah Brown, questionable with a foot injury. That said, he needs to practice on Saturday. I guess the Cowboys are doing these early morning Saturday practices because he did not practice all week. So, guys, I know you're mad at me. I've read the comments. I told you Michael Gallup. I dropped down from a damn helicopter and said Michael Gallup was gonna go bonkers last week, and he proceeds to goose egg. I am going back to the well, not sending him down that cursed freaking helicopter again. My God, I'm not doing that. But this week, in this matchup, especially in DFS, everyone and their mother is on Tony Pollard. I can see the Cowboys passing more because they don't have Zeke to give the ball up the middle 15 to 20 times. If Noah Brown ends up getting ruled out, like he was actually working ahead of Michael Gallup, Kavontae Turpin, doing some great things in the return game. I will always love, the USFL MVP. I'm just saying, I don't think he's going to be stepping into a bunch more. We've already seen how they feel about Jalen Tolbert. So don't let a down week 7 distract you from what could be a great week 8. I do think Michael Gallup has great bounce back potential if Noah Brown is going to end up being sidelined. Oh, that's a great call from Drake Holiday. Can we get James Washington back out here or sign a receiver? Where's my guy Will Fuller at, Dallas? Do something. This Cowboys team is inexplicably 5-2. The Eagles, meanwhile, keep making another move every single day. Yeah, I think it's a little bit of an overreaction to everything the Eagles do these days by the old mainstream media. But come on, Dallas, let's go. Let's try to compete here. Packers wide receiver Allen Lazard out with a shoulder injury. Sammy Watkins good to go with the hamstring. Christian Watson seemingly has a good chance to play despite being questionable with his own hamstring injury. So all that said, we're going to have Amari Rogers and something named Samori Torre. I know Samori, but okay. Romeo Dobbs is the only guy we can even somewhat trust in this passing game, but this is just such an impossible situation, Nick. I mean, before knowing for sure that Lazard was going to be out, I still had Romeo Dobbs as just my wide receiver 40, and I don't really plan on bumping him up all that much even from there. Overall thoughts on what Dobbs could bring to the table this week with Lazard out?
No, as you like to say, I think the answer here is no. Rodgers appears to be issuing, veiled calls to have Dobbs benched. So, like,
For
I don't
who?
trust Watson. I think Sammy Watkins is the idea. But my God, right? That's the proper response. So I don't think we can trust any of these guys, especially against the Bills.
Man, the way Sammy looked last week, he had a moment or two earlier on in the year before he got put on IR, but coming back, man, that dude looked like I wish we had GPS readings for every single player just so we could like take advantage of moments like that. Like I don't want the top speeds, I want like the bottom speeds so we can slander some of these guys. All right, Jets wide receiver Corey Davis out with a knee injury. We're going to have Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore, and Braxton Berrios and 3 wide receiver sets. We'll still see some Denzel Mims and, yes, even a little bit of Jeff Smith. This passing game, Zach Wilson, I support the experience because when he's bad, it's still a really fun watch. And, guys, they've thrown for 204 total yards in the last 2 weeks. 204 yards in 2 weeks. Now they're playing the Patriots. The answer to which one of these wide receivers to start, as Nick just said, as I like to say, no, don't do it. Commanders wide receiver Jahan Dotson out with the hamstring. Diami Brown groin questionable. Terry McLaurin should beat the guy here. What do you think about Curtis Samuel, though, Nick? Because I do expect McLaurin to catch that Stephon Gilmore shadow. Similar to what we're seeing with Wan'Dale Robinson in New York. Even in these bad passing games, when you have that low ADOT guy like Curtis, like Wan'Dale Robinson, I do think you can be a little bit, feeling better about their floor just by virtue of, we're relying on Heineke or, freaking Daniel Jones to complete a 5-yard pass instead of a 50-yard one.
Yeah, I wouldn't rely on him in cash games. You can squeeze him into a redraft lineup, but I really don't love this.
That's fair. I don't love much of anything going on in Washington these days, except my Buckeyes, of course. Giants wide receiver Kenny Galladay out with the knee injury, so Darius Slayton going to continue to be that top outside wide receiver. But yes, Wan'Dale Robinson really the only truly fantasy viable pass catcher. I have him as a wide receiver 34 this week. I think he's right there in a tier with guys like Darnell Mooney, Drake London, George Pickens, and Jerry Jeudy. Patriots wide receiver Nelson Aguilar, questionable. Kendrick Bourne, not listed. If anyone could maybe get a little bit of a showcase game, it could be Kendrick Bourne. But once again, that's just such like a who the hell knows if we're going to see that type of thing that other than a Galaxy Brain DFS start, don't play these guys because they're not even in 3 wide receiver sets. That's Jacoby, Tyquan, and Devontae Parker. Just 2 more quick ones. Browns wide receiver David Bell is banged up. We don't really care. And Jaguars wide receiver Jamal Agnew, questionable with a knee injury. So if he is out, maybe we see a few more design plays for Kirk and Zay Jones. But again, not someone to overly worry about. All right, guys, before we get on to tight ends, I want to pay some respect to our lovely sponsors out there. First and foremost, we got to give a lovely shout out as my ad sheet loads right here to our friends over at Western and Southern. The PFF Fantasy Football Podcast is sponsored by Western Southern Financial Group. While you focus on your roster moves, Western Southern helps advance your money moves, buying your first home, plan to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow. Western Southern's playbook of life insurance, investment, and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. Team up to understand needs and address goals with a game plan built just for you. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. Also, our friends over at Underdog. Even though Best Ball Mania has ended, Underdog Fantasy is still the easiest and most fun way to spice up your football season with their pick'em game. It's not available in freaking Ohio, which pisses me off, Nick. I was at my favorite Mexican spot, El Toro, last night, and I'm a simple man. I know I'm not going to hit 57% of my bets. I don't pretend to be this incredible gambler. I like to do the $10 parlay, and hopefully my dreams come true. They never do, but this next one's going to be different. You believe me, man. Anyway, that's basically what Underdog gives you the chance to do. Just look for your favorite or least favorite player stats. Pick whether you think they'll end up with a higher or lower total than that number in this week's games. And if you pick 5 of those correctly, you can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Underdog keeps it super simple with their easy-to-use website and mobile apps. Pick between 2 and 5 players for your pick-em entry. Get all your picks right, and you'll take home some cold, hard cash. It's simple to get started. Just head on over to UnderdogFantasy.com or download the app. Sign up with promo code PFF, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. So we've already been singing Underdog's praises about the Underdog NFL crew. Their NBA crew does awesome. They're getting into freaking soccer if you're into that kind of thing. Now, I'm not, but I respect the hustle. Now we have the pick-em game as well. So that's Underdog Fantasy, promo code PFF. Get in on the action today. I agree, Drake. Let's see Terry beat the Gilmore Shadow. He beat the Jair Alexander Shadow last week. Terry McLaurin has the best 70-yard games out of any player in the league, and I will not hear otherwise. But let's get through some tight ends, and then we'll get a few prop bets and some DFS stuff going. Lions tight end TJ Hawkinson, not listed with the knee injury, fully good to go. You're not going to have a better option out there to play. Just realize with the Sun God and probably, and yes, absolutely DeAndre Swift back in action, only so much meat left on the bone for Hawkinson. Over in Cleveland, David, hey, rare double miss from Schefter, by the way. Love the guy, appreciate all the hard work he does, but said the Njoku injury wasn't serious and said the Chuba Hubbard injury wasn't serious. Now it looks like neither guy is going to be able to suit up. So the Njoku with the ankle was in a walking boot today, and we even have Pharaoh Brown, their recently signed secondary tight end, out with a concussion and neck injury. Maybe not out just yet. Again, this is Monday night, but he hasn't been practicing. So sure, it looks like Harrison Bryant is going to be playing an every down role for the Browns come Monday night. Nick, who would you take, Harrison Bryant or Hayden Hurst?
Oh, that's a fantastic question, which I think that kind of communicates where we're at with Harrison Bryant.
Yeah.
I'd probably roll with Hayden Hurst, but like I really like Harrison Bryant, and if you are in need of a tight end, go at him.
I'm going to fire him up the rankings a lot here, and I think that's about right where they should be. It's going to be an every down role. Like, I'm so confident that we're going to see that 90% snap rate, and then he's going to be on the cover of every single waiver wire article. I believe the Browns, they have a week. Is it a week 9 bye or a week 10 bye? Because it is coming up.
I don't recall, but here, what I can say.
Week 9. Okay, it's week 9. So we're only getting 1 week out of it. And so if you want it, you got to do it now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. David Njoku is not going to come back for a long time. It was a high ankle sprain. The average time missed for tight ends is 4.8 games. And even after that, players, it usually takes a full offseason to get right from a high ankle. So like I would be selling high on Njoku if you can. Yeah. That's me personally.
Sucks, man. That dude was helping out a lot of Kyle Pitts teams until he wasn't.
Yes.
Raiders tight end Darren Waller, questionable with a hamstring injury. He did practice all week in a limited fashion. So if he's active, it's Darren Waller. Like, you know, it's one of these things with Kyle Pitts. I understand where you guys come from. Like, oh, how can we go back to the well here? Sit down, try to start ranking these tight ends, and you're going to get to guys like Darren Waller and Kyle Pitts far more quickly than you would hope. I don't feel good about ranking Waller as a top 5 or top 6 tight end, but objectively speaking, that is what he's going to be if he's active in this one. If not, Foster Moreau, similar manner as Harrison Bryant, someone that is going to be out there every single snap, more or less. I am less confident in Moreau demanding the same sort of volume, though. He shares an offense with too many other talented guys. Cowboys tight end Dalton Schultz expected to keep playing through the pain, but he's officially questionable with that knee injury. I'm just shocked that he's still freaking alive after he got bent back the way he did last week. And he kept playing through it. So clearly working out less than 100%. I don't think that he deserves to be that top 6, top 7 tight end you drafted him to be at this point, because he is that banged up right now. So still someone where if you want to put him in, the tight end 1 borderline, that's fine. Certainly don't need to force Dalton Schultz in the lineup right now. Nick, I think I'd start both Hayden Hurst and Harrison Bryant ahead of Dalton Schultz this week.
Agreed. Yeah.
Cool.
2 PCL setbacks.
Jeez, not great. Steelers tight end Pat Freiermuth, not listed with the ankle injury, good to go. Top 10 treatment with Kenny Pickett really starting to feed him the way for prolonged stretches. Commanders tight end Logan Thomas, questionable with the calf. We don't really care though. Armani Rogers and John Bates going to keep this a committee. Giants tight end Daniel Bellinger, eye socket surgery. Big yikes. They're just going to rotate guys in the meantime. Get that eye right, Daniel. And finally, this one's a little bit interesting. So Juwan Johnson, hamstring, questionable. He was a midweek addition on Thursday, but he got into limited practice on Friday. Adam Troutman is questionable with an ankle injury, and he was limited. Now, why? Why, Ian? Why are you talking about Juwan Johnson and Adam Troutman? Juwan did score 2 touchdowns last week, but the big thing here is if these guys are out, Taysom Hill might actually be forced to play something close to a full-time role. I don't know if there's like a player, Nick, that has like some more volatile rankings from one analyst to another than Taysom Hill. I continue to struggle to put him ahead of the full-time tight ends. That's usually my thing with him. I have him ranked this week, tight end 16 behind guys like Irv, Dolchich, Jasicki, Hurst, Bryant and all that stuff. It's tough though, because when you look at it, he does have that goal line role. Like, where do you fall in Taysom Hill? I've seen some people like unironically have him top 5 that I respect, and I can see it, man. But it's just there's no more touchdown dependent player in fantasy than Taysom Hill. That said, they put him in a lot of good positions to score touchdowns.
Yeah. So with Juwan Johnson's and Adam Troutman's status is uncertain right now. I have Taysom Hill as tight end 7. If those guys are both ruled out, I will probably move him. I would move him, I think, to number 5 behind Kittle, Ertz, Goddard, Hawkinson.
Jeez.
I mean, he's a full-time role. He's going to get carries. He will throw passes, and he'll run a few routes. Like, I'm fine taking, whatever low score he gets me, as opposed to like Evan Ingram. I mean, their floors are the same, but one guy can like throw and rush for a touchdown.
Okay, let's think on this for a second here.
Okay.
All right. He has thrown these last 3 weeks. Taysom Hill has thrown 5 passes. So we have that going for us. And that's with Dalton under center. So it makes sense they didn't have any the first week. So we can expect, 1 to 2 pass attempts out of Taysom Hill. He only has 2 targets all season. But if we're going to take Juwan and Troutman out of the picture, Thomas and Landry are out. Okay, I think it's fair to project him for a couple of targets. His carries this year have been 4, 3, 5, 9, 5, 3. So just by basic, patterns, we would expect this to go back to 9 or 4, not just playing everyone. But okay, so we're looking at roughly 3 to 5 carries. We'll say 2 targets in a pass attempt or 2. So I'm starting to talk myself into it, Nick. So okay, we're getting 5 to 7 combined carries and targets, maybe a pass attempt. Like, hey, with Irv Smith, am I really expecting more than 5 or 6 targets in his own right? And we know Taysom's are going to be closer to the goal line. So, okay. So we're saying over Tunyon, over Freiermuth. So we're saying, Taysom Hill over Kyle Pitts. Just fuck us, right?
I have him there, but the thesis behind the play is simply that he has a ceiling that like is really hard to find outside of Kelsey.
Yeah,
his floor is 0. Like his floor is as bad as it gets. But like we're trying to win weeks here, and Taysom Hill's a guy that can do that. It's ugly. I'm not saying it's Anyway.
First or last, the Taysom Hill and Ricky Bobby
go.
story. Okay, there we go. So keep an eye on those other guys, but even without it, Taysom Hill inexplicably shaping up as a pretty solid tight end 1 in fantasy land. 2 other quick notes, some really banged up secondaries. Now, the Buccaneers secondary was the 3rd one that really was hurting last night, and then Bateman gets hurt and just, completely screws all of us trying to pay attention to these sorts of things, Nick. So the Falcons secondary, though, all kinds of banged up this week. AJ Terrell out with a hamstring injury. Casey Hayward's still on IR. Free safety Jalen Hawkins is out with a concussion. Even DBD Alford is questionable. All good news for DJ Moore. For me, DJ Moore is a recommended start this week because 2 big things have really changed for him versus when he was busting a lot to start the year. Actually, 3 things. We have PJ Walker actually showing some kind of competence. We also have a really good matchup here against a Falcons secondary already has allowed the most PPR points per game to opposing wide receivers. And now we're getting their backups trying to, do better than that. And we also have the absence of Robbie Anderson and Christian McCaffrey. Like, those were two guys that could feasibly out-target DJ Moore during any given week. Now, Terrence Marshall, I know he's out there, and maybe we'll see Deontay Foreman get a few targets, but never has DJ Moore had a more clear path to getting double-digit targets every single game. It's great to see. I think it's a great spot this week to go ahead and start him. Also, Browns secondary, Denzel Ward, concussion, hasn't been practicing. Greedy Williams has an illness, and Greg Newsome has an oblique injury. So, look, T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, you guys are probably starting them in almost more leagues than not, and it's a good matchup too. So, great day to be great from that standpoint. That's going to wrap up our injury edition of this. Appreciate you guys always joining us along. Now we're going to move on to some cool DFS and a few prop betting things. So, Nick, we're going to get to your article in just a sec. I do have 3 prop bets for the people. I spoiled one already, the Alvin Kamara. I wanted you guys to get to it before they change it. Again, 4.5 receptions, minus 130 over at DraftKings Sportsbook with Andy Dalton under center. He has gone 6 catches, 95 yards, 6 catches, 25 yards, and 7 catches, 56 yards. So, hey, we all see Jameis Winston play. That dude has never seen, a coverage that he doesn't think he can beat. And he loves throwing the ball downfield. Highest average target depth in the NFL. Accordingly, Kamara has been able to have this underneath stuff. And it's not just Dalton. It's not having Michael Thomas or Jarvis Landry, fellow guys that are going to be a lot of times taking those underneath routes. So Alvin Kamara over 4.5 receptions. Absolutely love it. Raheem Mostert over 83.5 rushing and receiving yards, pending that injury report, which did clear, just minus 115 at DraftKings. Again, can't say enough bad things about the Lions' 32nd ranked defense. Raheem Mostert getting 15 to 20 combined touches per game, all in on that over. Finally, Chris Olave over 65.5 receiving yards, just 65.5 for a legit top 10 receiver and receiving yards this year, and or to catch a touchdown at any point in the game at plus 175. So the Saints offense is condensed around 2 guys. It's not Michael Thomas and Kamara anymore. It's Alvin Kamara and Chris Olave. Don't be afraid to keep going back to that well. Nick, before I get you to DFS land, do you have any bets you're liking this week? Props, guess the spread, game totals, anything?
No.
Okay.
I have not delved into the bets at this point.
You're good. Anything for the UFC stuff tomorrow? You got to lean on Silva Paul?
No, I'm just getting ready for Halloween, man. We've got some fun stuff going on right now.
Yeah, I think my fiance probably wishes I was more like you in that mindset. I'm going to make us sit down and watch one of my favorite all-time fighters lose to a fucking YouTuber. Okay, Nick, you do an awesome cheat sheet every single week. Your recommended DFS plays across all leagues. Let's talk about your top 5 favorite plays of the week. Just give me one, and I might challenge you on it, and then we'll move on to the next one. It'll be a great day. It'll be great.
Awesome. So first one on the DFS cheat sheet is Jalen Waddle. The way that I kind of approached this week was to create some bringbacks. So what I like about Waddle, he's a bit chalky, but he's not crazy chalky, and I think that he offers differentiating leverage potential when compared to Tyreek Hill and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Just looking at this game, like Tyreek Hill's ownership projection is 32.5%. It's absurd. Ooh. Waddle is down at 5.9%. He's 14 among wide receivers. So that's it. We have some differentiation here. He's only 6,700. You've kind of already gone into why we like playing against the Detroit Lions defense. They are league bottom in like half of the passing game metrics.
Yeah.
So, and Waddle has kind of garnered this reputation as being like the full-time second fiddle to Tyreek Hill. He's been battling 2 different injuries since week 3 while maintaining elite efficiency. So his yards per out run, yards after catch per reception, explosive pass plays are all top 5 among wide receivers. His missed forced tackles are top 10, and receiving yards overall are top 5 as well. So this guy hasn't lost any juice. He's finally getting healthier, and it's a smash play. Do you have anything to say on Waddle?
I just think, I'll run through kind of what I'm thinking my cast lineup is, but a really easy way to find good tournament plays is exactly what you're talking about. Just take the fellow talented teammate that's alongside the guy that everyone is rostering. We all realize Tyreek Hill is set up fine. That's why he's projected to be the highest owned wide receiver on the slate, more or less. So Jalen Waddle down there, priced next to Amon-Ra St. Brown, even in the same game, also just the pricing scale. Even someone like, Devontae Smith, Tyler Lockett could end up having a little bit more exposure than Jalen Waddle. So all in on that call.
Cool. So the bring back for this one is Detroit Lions tight end TJ Hawkinson. We all know Hawkinson is a great player. His ownership projection comes in at just 4.0%. A week ago, he would have been going up against Miami Dolphins safety Brandon Jones, who's having a pretty decent year. He kind of does everything. He's one of like their blitzing leaders on the team. But they give him a full complement of responsibilities. He suffered a torn ACL. He's out. So Hawkinson's primary coverage defender here is going to be backup safety Eric Rowe, who has a 34.3 PFF coverage grade, which is like 30 points lower than we would just kind of hope it to be. Hawkinson's tight end matchup chart, or excuse me, matchup advantage rating is 20.0%. Among all tight ends, that comes in as third best on the week. Rowe is allowing 2.29 receiving yards allowed per coverage snap with a 4.2% explosive pass play rate allowed. Those are the top two highest rates, respectively, among NFL safeties with at least 90 coverage snaps. So I like Hawkinson a lot as an explosive bring back option here.
And this is a rare situation where I think we can actually feel good about this matchup happening a lot throughout the game. I do the shadow matchups every single week. Lovely, just true grinder PFF, Ben Brown. If anyone had any idea how important this dude is to our lovely company, I mean, you would be surprised. So much love to my guy, Ben. Shoots me over, grinds all the shit. We have people watching every game, all this. I find out who has been shadowed. The only safety I can ever remember actually shadowing a tight end was Eric Rowe over these past few years. Hasn't been doing it this year, but truly the Dolphins treat him as their tight end stopper, if you will, the modern day Michael Jenkins and stuff like that. Going on Malcolm, excuse me, mixing up my Buckeyes. But yes, TJ Hawkinson, great bring back. And just, it's going to be a popular Tua Waddle Tyreek stuff. So don't be afraid. And Amon-Ra St. Brown. I know I said before, it is going to be crowded in Detroit. Another reason to like DeAndre Swift as well, coming off of injury. Nick, you're also a fan of Justin Jefferson, high price Vikings receiver. And just real quick before you say why, generally this week, guys, when you look at the DFS just landscape, the amount of value at running back in the 6K range, even 5K range, we got DJ Moore down there. There's a lot of value in there, so people can go ahead and get up to Tyreek Hill and DeAndre Hopkins. But these guys at the very top, because why pay an extra $1,100 for Cooper Kupp or $500 when you can get Tyreek Hill? I get that, but when it's a 1 week sample size and we're trying to be different, getting up to someone like Jefferson can make a lot of sense. Why else do you love him, Nick?
Yeah, so there are a couple of trap plays on the slate here, I think. Tyreek Hill, like I said, 32.5% and ownership projection. And we also have Devontae Adams at 9.8%. He's playing with what is being referred to as a bad flu. And apparently some of the Raiders locker room has also picked it up. So I think that teams that are going with those two X receivers they might just flop. What I like about Jefferson is he's still chalky. He's over 10% owned. But I think this is one of the few weeks where you might be able to play Jefferson in a GPP format and kind of get leverage over those other elite guys like Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams. He's going up against the Arizona Cardinals secondary. The way that Jefferson is playing, he's taking 43% of his snaps wide left, 32% in the slot, and 24 on the right. It's not just locked on one side like DeAndre Hopkins of old. He's taking snaps against all three of these underperforming or lacking in talent cornerbacks that the Arizona Cardinals wheel out there. Trayvon Mullen is expected to make his return. He's been out pretty much the whole year with a hamstring injury, but his PFF coverage grade is just 39.0. Marco Wilson, 54.7, and Byron Murphy, 59.1. It's just basically a bad trio of coverage defenders, and I think that Jefferson, who is top 10 in completion percent or catch rate, passer rating allowed, receiving yards. I'm going over this. Sorry.
You're good.
That's the Arizona Cardinals secondary. They are top 10 in most of our efficiency coverage statistics. So I think that Jefferson can basically just smash this situation. And I like him as a leverage play against those other elite guys.
And the one interesting thing here is to give Byron Murphy a little bit of respect. He did an awesome job against Devontae Adams back in week 2. I think it was like 2 catches, 12 yards, and a touchdown. And after that, we were kind of wondering, could this be the next big thing at cornerback? But as Nick brings up, really hasn't been continuing that dominance. And they haven't even been using him as a shadow cornerback since then. He's actually been playing a lot of snaps in the slot. So they face guys like A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, and Chris Olave. So look, we know Justin Jefferson can beat up anybody anybody. We saw him go for like 150 yards against Marshawn Lattimore a few weeks ago. Did the guy so bad he had to renew his Instagram or whatever and get on there and try to defend himself a little bit. So Byron Murphy, even if it's a situation where you think that he's a gamer, he can get up for these big matchups, I don't think it's going to be a one-on-one shadow matchup. And he actually was a Friday addition to the injury report with a back injury and is now questionable. So, hey, never want anyone to be injured, but when we're trying to target wide receivers, you take a bad cornerback and then you physically alter them somehow, all wheels up for Justin Jefferson. Nick, there is another tight end you like on a slate where there just really isn't like a smash tight end out there for this week. Mark Andrews already played on Thursday. Travis Kelce is obviously on bye. So not a lot to work with, but you're taking a long look at Zach Ertz over there, just 5,100 on DraftKings in the same Vikings matchup.
Yeah. And so what you just brought up is a big part of the process here. Travis Kelce's not playing. Gerald Everett's not playing. Mark Andrews already played. So we have Kittle, but in terms of like elite tight ends that might just dominate at this position, we're talking about him right now. Zach Ertz, per PFF's tight end matchup chart, is going to be going up against Minnesota linebacker Eric Kendricks, who's earned a 38.7 PFF coverage grade this year. Ertz garnered a 5.0% matchup advantage rating over Kendricks. That's the sixth highest on the slate. Ertz is a little bit older. He was never a tackle-breaking guy, but he still is top 5 in receptions, receiving yards, and first downs gained. He is top 10 in contested catch rate and NFL passer rating when targeted. His 18.9 targets per out run rate is 11th. Kendricks, so I've got a table in here that kind of breaks down his coverage deficiencies, but he is top 10 in all the worst ways. So I think Ertz is going to be able to just kind of pummel him all day long. And this is a high totaled game. I think it's at 49.0. I think that's the third highest over under on the week 8 slate. And finally, Ertz is one of, I think it was 3 tight ends that showed up in Josh Hermsmeyer's air yards buy low model. It's very, very reliable thing. And when we see guys on there, we want to go target them.
Hilarious note from Josh in the start of that. He, sometimes he'll redact players if they're just so bad that he just can't really trust their buy low stuff. And last week, the number 1 player was DJ Moore and redacted him. And Josh was just saying, what was his spot in the intro? Once again, he goes, the upside is just so high, and apparently so was I for redacting him. So always nice when you can laugh at yourself like Josh did. Hey, spoiler alert, the rest of it's on PFF.com, guys, but the number 1 buy low guy in Josh's model this week, CD Lamb. I love the idea in tournaments this week on DraftKings. Go with Dak, go with CD, maybe even bring it back with Gallup if you want to get wild. Either way, Dak and at least CD, because everyone's going to be on Pollard. That's a good way to just, again, get some leverage on pretty much the entire. We're talking about maybe like a 50% owned running back, even in tournaments this week with Tony Pollard. So anyway, you can just quickly differentiate off of that. I do think makes a lot of sense. And we haven't quite gotten that true blow-up performance from CD. Could be right on the way. All right, you have one more, Nick. And I will say every Friday I do a DFS prop bet show. My guy, Britt Devine, over at Roto Grinders. And I happened to pitch this very running back myself before we even started talking, Nick. So great minds, some might say.
Cool. So Miles Sanders, Philadelphia Eagles running back, going for 6,600 on DraftKings. I was surprised to see that the ownership projections have him at just 6.0%. That's the 17th highest among running backs on the week 8 slate. What I like about this is I think we're gaining a little bit of leverage with the Pittsburgh Steelers name. This is typically a front 7 to be feared, but in reality, it's full of holes. Larry Ogunjobi, who I really love. He's a fun player. He's good on Twitter. He has earned a 58.9 PFF run defense grade, which ranks 52 of 122 defensive tackles with at least 100 snaps. His 20.6 negatively graded run defense play rate is 5th highest among qualifying defensive tackles. So I think Sanders can kind of shoot the gap there. Now his backup, Tyson Alualu, has earned a 30.3 PFF run defense grade. Inside linebackers Miles Jack and Devin Bush are both in the 14 to 15% rate of negatively graded run defense plays. So for whatever reason, the middle of this defense, typically very strong, is not playing all that well. PFF's offensive line, defensive line matchup chart gives Philadelphia's offensive line a 26.0% run blocking matchup advantage grade over the Pittsburgh Steelers. That is quite high. I think it was top 3 on the week, maybe top 5 on the. No, that was top 3 on the week. Finally, the spread is really working in Miles Sanders' favor here. The Eagles are favored by 10.5 points with an implied team total of 27.0. So should be a lot of points scored here, and there should be a high volume of rushing attempts in what might be frequently considered to be a tough matchup.
I've gotten some questions like, can we expect Miles Sanders to keep on continuing this? And I think so. The Kenneth Gainwell takeover isn't happening when Sanders is healthy. Boston Scott seemingly less and less involved by the week and really kind of falling out of this committee. I know he's been hurt, but hey, that's the reason why that's sort of been happening. And you add it all together, man. And the only running backs this year with at least 15 plus touches in at least 6 games, Saquon Barkley, Austin Eckler, Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon, and Miles Sanders. Now, obviously, I wish Sanders was getting Eckler and Saquon's targets and stuff. So there is a difference in touches from that standpoint, but he's getting 15 to 20 touches in an offense at home, favored by a touchdown. Like, yeah, if he wasn't priced right next to Kenneth Walker and Ramondre Stevenson and Dameon Pierce, I do think people will be on him, but he's not those, rookies or Ramondre Stevenson players that everyone loves to lose their shit about. So the one concern that always pops up to me about Philly is like, but Jalen Hurts is just going to score touchdowns. He leads the freaking league and carries inside the 5-yard line, but that hasn't stopped them from still giving these guys the rock near the goal line. I mean, this 4th-ranked scoring offense, they're actually tied for 5th in terms of total running back carries, just running back, not Jalen Hurts, running backs inside the 10-yard line. I'm being a little bit of a dick here. Why shouldn't I use 5-yard line? Okay, they're tied for 16th inside the 5-yard line. Still better than what I would have expected, given that Hurts is such a key cog in that. So Miles Sanders, especially, man, just off Kenneth Walker and those guys in tournaments, I think makes a ton of sense. Few notes for myself here on the tournaments. I mentioned the Dak stack. Also, don't mind Daniel Jones and Wan'Dale Robinson with New York. Again, in that Seattle weather, if any one of those receivers is going to be able to do something, I do think it's going to be the guy with the low ADOT. Again, rags to riches at running back and wide receiver versus taking kind of the middle value, I think is an easy way to differentiate those lineups. So we have Derrick Henry, who his last 3 games against the Texans, he scored 7 touchdowns. He's gone for over 200 rushing yards each and every time. He's somehow not even carrying that high of ownership. So Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley going up against the Seahawks defense that's been flamed by running backs all season long. Like, again, people aren't going up to them because they don't think they have to. That's why it's an real easy way to get some differentiation in tournaments by, having that tough lineup where you have to go up there. Only takes one time to be right. He talked about Miles Sanders, also DeAndre Swift and Eno Benjamin. If you're going to dabble in that 6K range, just realize it's Kenneth Walker, Dameon Pierce, and Ramondre Stevenson are the ones really driving most of the ownership, in addition to Tony Pollard all the way down there. So the easy pivots off those guys, Eno Benjamin, Miles Sanders, and DeAndre Swift too. I don't even think the roles are going to look all that much different, Nick. So I think you can just talk about who's more talented. But again, 1 week in tournaments, don't be afraid to get a little bit different there. Down at 30, what we say before, how can we kind of differentiate? We pivot off the chalky guys. So we go Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. Maybe, just maybe, we go DJ Moore down to 3.5K, Terrence Marshall. It's gross. If you guys tell me that you played him because I told you to, I'll deny it. If you win $1 million playing it, I want all the credit. Marquise Goodwin, 4.4K, 2 touchdowns. Not illegal for a guy to score 2 touchdowns in back-to-back weeks, especially if Locke and Metcalf wind up not playing. And yes, I do like going back to Michael Gallup. Probably won't drop out of a helicopter to tell everyone that this time, though. And finally, at tight end, anytime George Kittle is going to be even a little bit under-owned and under 6K, I do think he warrants at least a little bit of exposure, especially with Deebo Samuel out and a lot of people probably going on to Brandon Ayuk more so instead. And Mike Gesicki at 3.8K, man, like, again, the whole showcase thing is up for debate, but this is the lowest owned guy in the Dolphins offense. And, more than anything, I just want to watch the dude gritty out there. So maybe that's like influencing my, DFS thought process here. But I just think, honestly, where we don't really have a clear chalky tight end, I mean, people are trying to get up to Tyler Higbee, bro. So Pitts, Freiermuth, and Higbee seem to be where a lot of people are going. If you go just a little bit under that, I do think Mike Gesicki can make a lot of sense right there. And real quickly, just quick cash show lineup. I do think Sam Ellinger on DraftKings at just 4K. You don't need him to do pretty much anything in order to meet that. I think based on what you can get up to, it does make sense to roll with Ellinger. Running back, hey, all those guys I just talked about fading in tournaments, they are chalky for a reason. So let's go ahead and just swoop them up in cash. Tony Pollard, Rondre Stevenson, and Kenneth Walker are my favorite cash game plays there. At wide receiver, I do like getting up to Tyreek. DeAndre Hopkins, still underpriced relative to the target ceiling he can have. And DJ Moore, we talked about him with the volume and the matchup, appreciating that. Our cheap tight end we can save money on is Noah Fant at 2.8K. I'm almost tempted, Nick, to instead of playing just Sunday main slate cash, to play like the London to the Monday night, just so we can get Harrison Bryant in there at the Stone Cold Min 2.5K. We'll see what happens. Then on defense, if you want to go all the way down to Washington, it's fine. I'm a little hesitant just because then you're playing Washington against Ellinger in the same lineup, which is not optimal. But when we're saving that much money with both, you probably can swallow it. If not, though, just go up to 3K. We got the Patriots playing Zach Wilson. That should go fine for them. So that's going to wrap this up, everyone. Nick, let the people know what you got on PFF.com and anything else you want to get off your chest.
Cool. Yeah. So we have the DFS cheat sheet week 8. We have the wide receiver cornerback matchups for week 8. We have this podcast. You can find my work on Twitter at Nic Bodiford NFL, spelled NICBODIFORD NFL. You can also find my other stuff at 4for4, 33rd Team, and Nerdball. But come give the PFF stuff a read first.
And before we get out of here, sleeper of the week. Shout out to our fine friends over at Sleeper. My favorite place to play redraft and even some dynasty football. Just love everything about that app. Works very easy. They got a bunch of animation stuff. I hate the noises it makes when you're drafting, but they provide a mute button, Nick. So if that's the only thing that really pisses me off, then you're doing a pretty good job with your product. So my sleeper of the week, I'm going back with Michael Gallup. I think he's going to come back here. This is a classic example of a talented player in an ascending offense with Dak back, has one bad week, and we all of a sudden just write off the possibility. So yes, if you focus on Michael Gallup in week 7 of the year 2022, no, you're not going to see a guy that can even catch a football, but I like to think we've seen enough of Gallup, enough of this Cowboys offense to feel good about his potential for the rest of the season. So he's healthy. He's out there. Noah Brown's banged up. This is a matchup where they should be throwing the ball more. I am going back to Michael Gallup as a solid wide receiver 3. Super going out on the limb there, Ian. So good stuff. Nick, you guys can catch all my positional breakdowns each and every week. And I also write this out in injury form. And we also get some injury analysis from our injury expert, Mario Pilato. So you can check out that little, teamwork makes the dream work piece we have out over the weekend. And as always, the Sheesh Report will be out after Monday Night Football, maybe Tuesday morning, depending on when the editors do their thing. So appreciate you guys tuning in. As always, it's week 8. Week 8 is going to be gone next time we talk, guys. Freaking crazy how fast some of this has flown by, but we still got half a season. Winners focus on winning, and we will continue to focus on just that. So for Nick, I'm Ian. Thanks so much for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Until next time, take care, everybody.